Board of Haverford Township meeting of Thursday, January 16. Seated at the table here to my far right is Margie Buchanan, Deputy Zoning Officer, Kelly Kirk, Zoning Officer. To my immediate right, Ken Richardson, a voting member. Good evening. To my left, Jessica Vitale, far left, Jessica Vitale, voting member.
Good evening.
And next to her is Ed McGargy, voting member and secretary. And to my immediate left is our solicitor, Bill Malone. We have a decision, and we have one continued case and two new cases. But before we start, Ken, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Please rise.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands
one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Our first case, our decision tonight involves the case Z19-24, the Bricks of Havertown LLC, trading as Brick and Brew, owner of 2931 East Eagle Road, Havertown. Folios number 220-300-81500 and 220-300-81600. The applicant seeks a modification of the relief granted by this zoning hearing board under its decision entered in case number Z18-26 to allow seasonal rooftop dining in a 793 square foot portion of the existing roof. The applicant also seeks a variance from the parking space requirements of section 182-707B, or in the alternative, a determination that the applicant's existing and leased parking spaces are sufficient. The property is zoned C3 Commercial District and is located in the 3rd Ward. Ken, do you want to take this case?
Yes. I would vote to approve the request of the applicant to modify the order entered in case number Z18-26, removing the restriction of rooftop access, but limiting that access to the portion of the roof that is over the applicant's building, and specifically not the seasonal porch. I also vote to approve the requested parking variance, subject to the same conditions contained in the order entered in case number Z-18-26.
Jessica
I agree.
and Ed?
I agree, but my vote is in favor of the issue of the parking is unrelated to the rooftop dining because there is no requirement for parking for rooftop dining, but I just want to reaffirm this requirement from the previous decision.
And I also agree with the motion, so that is approved 4-0.
Mr. Rhodes, case Z1931 is on the agenda for tonight concerning 752 Buck Lane. I will not read the full description of it, but I will indicate that I received a correspondence from the attorney for applicant, and they have withdrawn their request and their application in this matter. So Z1931 should be marked as withdrawn.
All right. Thank you. So our one continued case that we have tonight is case Z19-29, Janice and Rolnick and William Sidney's, thank you. Owners of 831, 835 Penn Street in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania, folio number 2205-008-1400, appealing the determination of the zoning officer that the existing lot improved with a single-family semi-detached dwelling and non-conforming commercial garage cannot be subdivided as a matter of right under code section 182-713.b and section 182-802 to allow for the construction of a single-family dwelling in a proposed newly created lot. The property is zoned R6 and is in the 5th Ward. Counselor, I think you were still conducting your case in chief. when we were cut off by time, and I apologize for that and for having everyone have to come back to finish, and for the public who had to make a second trip. Do you want to pick up and remind those who are maybe in the audience really quickly, any background or refresher?
Thank you, and good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year to the board. And we appreciate being first on the agenda. We were here, we had to lock the doors at 11 o'clock the last time, and we thank anyone from the neighborhood for coming back as well. We were in the middle of presenting the case. We only had one witness, Dennis O'Neill from Herbert McCombie Engineers, and I'd like to resume with Dennis. And his testimony will be very brief. And as you know, this is proposed as a two-lot subdivision on Penn Street in Bryn Mawr. And the property is located in the R6 district and has on it currently an existing single-family semi-detached dwelling as well as a non-conforming commercial garage. And I don't think there's any question, the record is clear, that the township recognizes that garage as a non-conforming commercial use, and that was so explained in the memorandum, I shouldn't say the memorandum, the letter that had been prepared by the zoning officer, from which we've taken an appeal to the board. So what is proposed is a two-lot subdivision. The Lot 1 in the proposed subdivision would contain the existing single-family semi-detached dwelling as well as the existing non-conforming commercial garage use. Lot 2 would be subdivided and would contain a proposed single-family detached dwelling, which is a use permitted in the R6 district. Both dwellings would be served by an existing curb cut that would be now located between the two dwellings that would serve and provide access to a driveway that would be a common driveway essentially along the new boundary line between the two lots in the subdivision. The zoning officer had made a determination that this was not permitted under section 182.713 of the code, as well as 182.802 of the code. We've appealed that, and we've provided a memorandum to you at the time of our last meeting. I have additional copies of that memorandum. I know sometimes when there's been a continued hearing, it's not the easiest thing to put your hands on all of the documents that were previously submitted. So if any of you does not have that memorandum, it's only a two-page memorandum that really outlines our legal position with respect to this application.
I would like to have that memorandum.
And I have it in
Not the search.
extra copies. I also wanted to just hand up to the members of the board now copies of the relevant ordinance sections that you will look at, so you have them all together. And they are 182.208, which sets forth the R6 medium-density residential district regulations, the use as well as the area and bulk regulations and parking regulations. We also set forth 182.713, which was the provision on which the zoning officer's determination was based, 182.713B. And we've also added here the nonconforming use provisions, and the one that is applicable and we believe controlling here is under subsection A of 802 that provides for the continuation of lawful uses located within a building. They, when they become nonconforming, they may be continued so long as they remain otherwise lawful, including subsequent sales of the property. So I'll hand them into you as well as copies of the memorandum. If there's anyone who is here who's interested in this who doesn't have these, I'm happy to. These are just what you circulated? Yeah.
And just for clarification, are you Mr. Sutton who just spoke up?
Apologies, yes.
I just want to make sure it's clear for the record. And at the last hearing, you requested and were granted party status. I just want to make sure that for the transcript, we have your name on the record.
Thank you.
And Mr. Fromhold, while I have you here, A11, which is Mr. O'Neill's CV, was mentioned but was not admitted. That'll be admitted at this point. And A12, your memorandum, will be admitted as well. There is no need to mark or admit as an exhibit these sections of the code.
Yeah, thank you. And I just wanted to hand them in for your convenience rather than flipping back and forth between sections. And I had highlighted what we believe those provisions that you would go to. One of the requirements that I think is incumbent on us is to show that the proposed subdivision does in fact meet the various objective requirements, the area and bulk requirements of the R6 regulation. So if Mr. O'Neill would come back, and we, I believe, we're providing testimony with respect to the proposed plan. We had introduced some of the other exhibits, the aerials, the existing conditions plan, and we were in the process of talking about the proposed conditions plan. So I'm just going to ask Mr. O'Neill to go back, get you oriented on the lots, where the improvements are located, the driveway that I spoke of, and the other relevant aspects of the lot. And of course, the important end question to all of this will be whether each of these lots complies with all of the applicable requirements in the R6 district.
Mr. O'Neill, you were previously sworn and remain under oath.
Thank you. So Dennis, if you could pick up, I had a question there, I think, for you. So if you could just start, tell us a little bit about that.
Thank you. The existing lot is 16,000 square feet. It's located along the southerly side of Penn Street. It, as was mentioned, contains an existing non-conforming garage and an existing semi-detached dwelling, which on my plan is shown in the orange color. And then there's an extensive driveway and stone area on the site. The existing dwelling is approximately 912 square feet. There's no changes proposed in the size of that. The existing garage is 2,145 square feet. There's a small alcove of the garage that's proposed to be taken down. It's a little shed area of it. The total impervious on the existing site is 54.43%, and the existing building coverage is 19.73%. The applicant proposes to subdivide an existing lot from the site, which is 4,856 square feet, along the left-hand side of the lot, looking at this colorized plan of proposed improvements. It is 56 feet across the front or street width, and it is 86.71 feet deep. It's a rectangular lot. We're proposing a single-family dwelling on the lot. As Mr. Fromhold mentioned, the existing driveway is proposed to service both lots. The driveway will provide 2 parking spaces for the proposed dwelling to the rear of the dwelling and 2 new proposed spaces for the semi-detached dwelling. The dark green area that you see towards the rear lot line is currently a stone area, and we're proposing to remove that. That's currently an informal parking for the semi-detached dwelling. It's the only structure, residential structure on the site. They shared some of that parking with the occupants of the garage. There's another large dark green area that you see, kind of forms a triangle in the driveway. That's part of the asphalt driveway that currently exists. That's proposed to be removed to help reduce retainage or impervious area. The proposed dwelling, proposed building coverage for Lot 2, which is the proposed lot, will be 26.6 36%, which is below the 40% permitted for a single-family dwelling in the R6. The total impervious coverage of Lot 2 is proposed to be 43.12%, which is below the 65% that's permitted. On Lot 1, the proposed coverage, again, is below what is permitted of 45% at 27.43%. And the building coverage on Lot 1 is 58.85%, which is below the 75% permitted for a single-family semi-detached dwelling.
Dennis, can I just ask you, you said 75%?
Yes,
But lot.
total impervious.
Total impervious, you said for lot 2 was 65%, didn't
That's
you?
correct, because if we're using the single-family dwelling requirements, since it's a single-family dwelling. On Lot 1, the existing is a semi-detached dwelling, so there's a little different standard for that in the R6 district. Both building types are permitted uses in the R6 district.
And then Dennis, just to be clear on this, A6, which is our plan of proposed improvements, has in the lower left corner of that zoning chart, is that correct? The zoning compliance chart that shows what is required and what's proposed for each of these lots. And as you explained, the requirements for Lot 1, which is going to contain the single-family semi-detached dwelling, they are different, those area and bulk requirements for Lot 1 than they are for for Lot 2, which is a single-family detached dwelling.
That's correct. The proposed house is proposed to be set back 23 feet from the right-of-way line. The requirement in the R6 district is only 20 feet, but after reviewing the median setback, it's been determined that the median setback is 22.76 feet, so we're moving the house back a little further.
Could you just clarify how you determine that median setback?
We have to measure the setback of existing houses 300 feet on either side of the proposed dwelling, which we measured along Penn Street, yes. We're proposing to reduce the site coverage because of what we're removing from the gravel and the black top driveway. We're proposing to reduce total impervious on the site by approximately 20%. We're also proposing stormwater management. We have done testing on the site. There are 2 basins proposed, subsurface infiltration basins, one in front of the house, which will capture the roof drains from the proposed house, one behind the house, which will capture part of the driveway and other lawn areas in order to meet the township stormwater management code for both volume and rate control.
And were the board to approve this appeal, would we be required to submit a subdivision application to Haverford Township to obtain the commissioner's approval of this 2-lot subdivision?
Yes, we would. As was previously mentioned, we're not proposing any new curb cuts on the site or on the street. So we're going to utilize the existing driveway. As a matter of fact, we are narrowing it down a little bit at the street. It's currently about 14 foot wide, and we're going to narrow it down to a 10-foot wide driveway in order to help reduce some of that area that it takes up along the front of the street.
And would that 10-foot wide driveway meet the requirements of the township's ordinance?
Yes, it would. And that's the proposal for the subdivision.
Mr. O'Neill, can you tell me, on the proposed new lot, are there any pre-existing nonconformities?
I'm sorry.
Are there any pre-existing nonconformities on the lot in which you intend to build?
There are not.
Okay. So no side yard issues as it is now?
On the proposed lot, there are no nonconformities.
How about on the existing lot?
On the existing lot, the garage, the existing commercial garage is non-conforming with respect to side yard. However, I would point out that the side of the garage is a party wall to the garage that it abuts to, which is a permitted in the code to have a party wall garage.
Other than that, are there any other nonconformities on the lot with the existing building?
The rear of the garage is up on the lot line, but again, if it is part of a retaining wall, that.
Right, I just want to make sure we have it clear where any pre-existing nonconformities are. Are those the only
They're the
two?
only two.
Thank you.
And just to be clear on that, Mr. Malone, this garage is a non-conforming commercial garage. So as it's not an accessory building, it's not an accessory use or accessory building, because to be such, it would have to be customarily incidental to the residential use on the property. It isn't. So in and of itself, it's a non-conforming use. It's in a non-conforming location on the lot as it now exists. That's not going to change. There is no proposal to enlarge it, extend it, or add to it, or alter it in any way, either, on the exterior. Mr. O'Neill did testify there's a kind of lean-to shed that's next to the garage in this location. On the east side of the garage is small shed that's going to be removed, but otherwise the building would be intact.
Thank you.
So
So-
that's what is happening with respect to lot number one.
But is it fair, though, that if the subdivision occurred, the non-conforming building would represent a greater percentage of the square footage of the resulting Lot 1 than it does of the current lot?
That is correct, but we're not dealing with a situation where we have a nonconformity to coverage that is, we have an existing conforming situation with respect to the building and impervious coverage. We're going to have on the subdivision an existing conforming situation with respect to impervious surface and coverage. So there would be a concern if we were non-conforming to that and we were increasing the non-conformity. If we were not conforming to the impervious surface coverage on this lot currently and subdividing and increasing that non-conformity, then we would be creating an increase, but we are not doing that. We're conforming now. We're going to be conforming post subdivision. Thank you, Dennis. I don't have any other questions, and whether the board has more questions or
Well,
anyone.
before we
in
get
the-
there, Mr. Sutton did request party status. Mr. Sutton, do you have any questions of Mr. O'Neill?
I do, I have one question.
Very well.
Hi, Mr. O'Neill. Question about when we look at the plan, the setback that is directly in front of the existing garage. So what I would call the front of the lot, front of the existing garage, and immediately behind lot 2, you have that designated as a 12-foot setback. Just wondering if you could explain, it seems to me that based on your chart, setback for a front yard is 25 feet.
The definition of a front yard setback requires it to be adjacent to the street line. This would be the street line of the road of Penn Street. Because there's a lot between Penn Street and that lot, we're interpreting that to be akin to a side yard.
I would just ask the board to consider, in light of the policy of the law, to strictly construe zoning ordinance provisions that permit the existence of nonconforming uses, that they consider whether that's a proper interpretation, given the fact that if the lot were not so shaped the way it was, would that not normally be a front yard?
Understood, thank you. Anything else at this point?
No, not at this time.
Great, thank you. Mr. Fromhold, anything else for Mr. O'Neill?
I don't have anything from Mr. O'Neill. I would like,
I'm going to see if the board members as well want to ask any questions. Mr. McGargy, any questions for Mr. O'Neill?
Yeah, the question is, on non-conforming use, we usually try to not make any changes on the lot unless it's benefiting or going in the way of the ordinance. The question is, this non-conforming use, putting it in a smaller parcel, how does that benefit the situation?
Doesn't change, excuse me, it doesn't change the situation.
Well, it adds another
Doesn't,
property that's going to complain to the township about noise, odors, parking problem. It adds another house to the problem.
I think that's subjective, in my opinion.
Sure, but that's some of the things that we do. Okay. That's the only question I had.
Jessica, any question?
No questions.
No question.
I don't have any other questions right now.
Thank you.
if I may, I'd just like to address further from my perspective on that. I believe what this will do, I don't know how familiar you all are with Penn Street. We have some photographs that show that this is now a gap, an open lot. So as you're driving along Penn Street, you have a rhythm of all of the homes. And then you come to this, which is a gap, although you look back and deeper into the lot, you see the non-conforming commercial garage that's back there. What this will do, I believe, from the public standpoint, the public health, safety, and welfare, and the impact on the public, this will provide a screen, and a wider screen than you would get if it were just a twin on this lot. So it'll be a nicer screen, so as you drive along the street, that non-conforming garage that's in the rear of the property will not be nearly as noticeable, if noticeable at all, as it is today. So I think there will be a public benefit, I would submit, from.
So I would ask the
From
public, that if you have a comment, you can certainly come up, but we do try to maintain a certain level of decorum here, and we do try to provide everybody, and everyone will have an opportunity to speak, but to interrupt either council statements or witnesses would be inappropriate, so please keep that to yourself. Please go on, Mr. Frommer.
Thank you, and I understand there may be a difference of opinion on that, but I think that is a reasonable point of view. So that will screen. Whoever would purchase this property as a new home would be fully aware of the nature of that use behind it. There would be an opportunity to do screening along the rear property line, which is not shown on this plan, but may well be something that would be done with regard to the development of the home or during the subdivision process as well.
Now, Mr. Frommer, at the beginning of that comment that you made, you referenced photographs. Are you referencing exhibits A8 and A9, or are you referencing other photographs that have not been marked as
Yeah,
exhibits?
I'm referencing those that had been marked.
Thank
Yes. Yes. And I would like, before you conclude, either now or after my preference would be after there has been any testimony that's presented, to take just 2 minutes to
For closing?
to
Yes.
sum up.
Okay. Does that complete applicant's case?
It does.
Okay.
So, Mr. Sutton, the applicant's completed his case, and as you're a party, you can come up, and if you'd like, you can present evidence, present testimony.
Sure.
You've been sworn in. If you have, do you have any exhibits or anything physical that you want to submit?
I don't.
Okay.
No. So, thank you. I'll be brief. I just wanted a little bit of time to address some of the applicant's legal arguments. And again, I'll start out with the position that I'm sure your solicitor will advise you, is that it's the policy of the law in Pennsylvania that nonconforming uses are inconsistent with the basic purpose of zoning to create for orderly development, and that it's the policy of the law that nonconforming uses are to be strictly construed. Ordinances permitting nonconforming uses are to be strictly construed, and nonconforming uses generally are meant to be eliminated as quickly as possible and consistent with the parameters of the law. The applicant, one of the applicant's arguments is that the zoning setback and other dimensional requirements do not apply to the garage because section 182.711 applies to private garages or other accessory structures to residential buildings. Frankly, my belief is that's a rather absurd interpretation of the ordinance, given that that section of the ordinance deals with a residentially zoned section of the township. Therefore, it would be inconceivable that an ordinance that is addressing uses within a residentially zoned area would address commercial uses. So the applicant, through that argument, is basically trying to take advantage of the nonconformity to, again, to expand the intent and create a more intense use of the property, which, you know, again, and I'm sure you'll hear from some of the other residents who have concerns about things like parking and the overall intensification of the use. But again, that's, to me, that interpretation that somehow those area and dimensional requirements don't apply because the commercial garage is not a quote-unquote private garage or accessory to a residential building fails. Because again, if you look at the ordinance, that section of the ordinance was purposefully drafted to address development in a residential section. Thank you.
Thank you.
Counselor, you can cross if you want.
No cross. I think that was essentially argument. I would like to respond to it at the appropriate.
Sure, we still have to do public comment at this point.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Sen. Oh,
Yep.
Thanks. Okay. I wanted to address some of the discussions, specifically regarding, well, obviously, the non-conforming uses and use of the land, use of the building. In the sections of the code that we've been discussing, it does say that, you know, the whole situation, the whole reason we're here is the reduction and modification of lots, and that's basically where everything else is trickling down from. But I think importantly, and what's been slightly ignored in that section of the code is that it says that it must comply in all respects with the area and other requirements of the district in which such building is located. So we are non-conforming as to use, we're non-conforming to area and bulk, as far as the setback requirements of, even if it were not considered an accessory structure, it's not conforming in any way with any of those uses or setbacks. Furthermore, when you go to 182.802 regulations concerning non-conforming uses or buildings, under B, enlargement of a non-conforming use, building, or structure, a non-conforming use, building, or structure shall not be extended, enlarged, or added to in any manner unless said use, building, or structure, including any additions and enlargements. Enlargements being the key word there. And the definition of enlargement in the zoning code is an addition to the floor area of an existing building, an increase to the size of another structure, or an increase in that portion of the tract of land occupied by an existing use. By decreasing the size of the lot, by creating another property, you are essentially increasing the portion of the tract of land that the non-conforming use is occupying. Currently, and if the engineer would like to check my math, the non-conforming garage is occupying 13.4% of the lot. With the proposed reduction of the lot, it would be occupying 19.45, as noted on the plans. So the current building coverage on the lot is 19.73. It seems like a bit of 10 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound sack to create a lot that now is, or you know, reducing the lot in such a way that it's the same building coverage of the entire lot now, of just the non-conforming use. May have had something else. That's the gist of it. Oh, I'm sorry, I did have one more thing. Apologize. And as far as the existing and continuation of the use itself, there is a certificate of use and occupancy certificate for the use that was issued in 2008. There's no reason to think that the continuation of the use could not be if the lot wasn't being reduced, if it wasn't for this proposed subdivision. So I don't believe that there is any issue as far as the township attempting to cease the use as it remains today. But because of the area and bulk requirements, the use, and all of those other non-conforming situations that we all agree exist, that the reduction of the lot causes those issues and would need a variance in order to be subdivided.
Okay, so at this point, we'll open the hearing up to public comment. So I'll start with, are there any residents who received certified mail who would wish to speak tonight? Okay, I can't see because of the board whether there's people on that side with their hands up, but, okay. Ma'am, would you like to come up and speak? We'll need to swear you in. I hope you don't mind.
Fine.
Okay. Eileen, you want to swear in?
I do.
Okay, and could you state for the record, before you start, your full name and address, and maybe spell your name?
Yes, my name is Margaret, Margaret, Dobbs, Dobbs. I'm the owner and resident of 837 Penn Street. It's the twin that is attached to the twin on the subject property.
So you're attached to the existing twin on the other side of the party wall.
That's correct.
Okay, what would you like to say?
Okay, so I have a couple comments. I had wanted to make the argument, actually, so Kelly already beat me to that one, regarding the definition and just looking at the zoning code for the issue of looking at the use of the building versus the building as the non-conforming property. So the argument that the township would be limiting the continuance of the non-conforming is not true in this case, and we're looking at just the subdivision of the lot. I did want to comment on the resulting shape of the lot that we would get with the subdivision. Currently, right now, we have one kind of rectangular property on this street. We do have regular properties that are regular in shape. They are rectangular, they are narrower in the front, and they are deeper in the back. And what this would create would be a shorter lot, and then the second lot would almost be like a flag lot. So we've already established that the garage is not considered an accessory use to the twin dwelling. It is by itself a use, and it is a secondary use on the lot. So Lot 1, which has the existing twin dwelling and the garage, has two principal buildings on a lot, and it has two principal uses on the lot, one of which is a residential use and one of which is a commercial use. Under Section 182, 706A6, under prohibited uses, the code does prohibit panhandles or flag lots from being created either by subdivision or lot line change. I would argue that Lot 1 would become a panhandle lot, which would be prohibited under that code section, in which case we now have three different uses pulling from the same driveway for all of their parking, off-street parking needs. And Lot 1 is a panhandle lot. So we have two off-street parking spaces provided for each of the residential dwelling units. But again, when we're looking at the lot configurations, we have one driveway with essentially three parking lot areas. So the two off-street parking spaces behind Lot 2, and then the two off-street parking spaces at the rear of Lot 1, and then the larger parking area in front of the garage bays on the commercial garage. So for me, that just raises a question as to the viability of this property in the future. Obviously, this particular property owner will not own this property forever. At one point in time in the future, it will go to a new property owner, and I just worry that the shape of the lot is going to create conflicts down the line, because most properties have straight lines all the way down in that regular rectangular shape. And with this panhandle lot, we're limiting the access of the new residential dwelling to the rear of the lot, which would normally be used as a backyard. So again, just concerns about the intensity of that lot space. When we have 3 distinct uses on 2 lots, that was one formerly lot. We do, in terms of having a gap there, it's actually quite nice to have that gap, because we are a pretty dense street, so to have that open space right now is actually rather nice, to be able to have that gap in the middle of the block. But regardless of that, again, it really goes back to the viability of these properties and the irregularity of the lot sizes, or not lot sizes, I'm sorry, but just the lot shapes that are being created as part of the subdivision. Not specifically related to the subdivision, but just general concerns about the resulting development of this lot. We do already experience significant water in our basement anytime that it rains, and we have had a lot of very rainy weather recently. So my sump pump is constantly pumping out. I do get water in my basement. I am concerned about the increase in impervious coverage. Despite the fact that some of the driveway is going to be removed, I didn't see, and obviously there wouldn't be extensive landscaping shown on these preliminary plans, but I would have concerns about landscaping. There is actually no street tree, as is shown on the plan. Currently, the property doesn't have any landscaping besides the shrubs around the driveway area. And I am concerned about the stormwater basins that would be proposed in the front and the rear yards of Lot 2. I just am concerned again about the viability of putting landscaping over those, and then any future property owners would be severely limited in being able to use those, because they would be underground stormwater basins, which would really limit the use of those space. And again, we all know that best intentions aside, property owners may end up doing things that would result in damage to neighboring properties by putting patios and such in. So I'm just already concerned about impervious, and I would be concerned about making sure that if this subdivision goes through and if this land development progresses, that we're very clear about the stormwater management on the site, and being able to show that it's going to be managed effectively on this site. Additionally, I did have a question about why we're using the average setback. The standard for the zoning district says a 20-foot minimum, and then elsewhere in the code it does say for new construction you'd have to do the median. I'd rather not deviate that much away, that's just a question that I had about why we're using the median versus what the minimum standard is for the zoning district. And then the other thing that I would have a question about, which results or would relate to the architectural design of that new single-family house, is the provision of a porch. So when we're talking about setbacks and we're talking about meeting the character of the neighborhood, as Mr. Fromhold discussed, kind of that regular spacing on the block, all of the houses have front porches, and all except the twin of this property are open front porches. So losing that or not providing an open porch, I think would be detrimental to the cadence of the street if we're concerned about maintaining that regularity and that appropriateness of the historical context of our street, which is over 100 years old. And then finally, just going back to the parking briefly, just the feasibility of the parking. We have what looks like a 10-foot wide drive aisle, and the parking spaces appear to meet the minimum 9 by 18, but in most parking areas, the minimum drive aisle is anywhere between 12 and 14 feet wide, and that's to allow cars to effectively make turns. So I would just be concerned about the ability of those cars in the parking lot behind Lot 2 to be able to pull off the shared driveway and into those parking spaces without sticking out into that driveway, which would impede access for the residents coming up the driveway to park in the furthermost lot spaces for Lot 1's residents. So these are just questions that I wanted to raise now, and this is again if and when the land development moves forward. But to reiterate just my concerns with the subdivision at this time is that the question of the existence of the nonconforming use shouldn't preclude this property from adhering as best as we can to the legislative intent of the zoning district to allow for regular and consistent use on the street. And I just feel that the provision of a twin and a garage and a single family, all on the same amount of property that should only have 2 residential uses, is too much. So I just feel that in this case, the shape of the lot and the intensity of the uses should not be supported by the subdivision. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good job. Anyone else who got certified mail who wishes to speak? Come on up. Hi. So you'll need to be sworn in.
Okay.
Arlene,
Yes.
and will you state your name and address and spell anything that might be necessary for the record?
My name is Sherry Hulcher. That's SHERRIHULCHER. I live at 828 Penn Street, Bryn Mawr, PA.
Okay, what would you like to say?
So I live directly across from the property that we're speaking about where the building is to be built. I'd like to raise several concerns as a neighbor on Penn Street. You know, Penn Street, as Maggie said, is a 100-year-old street, you know, beautifully brick homes, front porches, and, you know, to have something put there that isn't, you know, going along with that and the integrity of the street is a concern to me. Another concern to me is the parking, the general parking, on-street parking. If you go down Penn Street, there's 3 houses between Railroad and Miller that have a parking lot for 1 car. And then we're reliant then on on-street parking. The other houses have very long driveways that can fit, you know, as many cars as you might want to have. So being one of those with a very small driveway for 1 car, I'm always relying on on-street parking for our second car. And I'm concerned that if we add another property, even with adding 2 parking spaces in the back, in addition to parking spaces for the single home, in addition to parking for the garage, that the parking on the street will be severely limited. You know, people will have guests or, you know, or whatever. And so that's a big concern to us for our daily living. A second concern is the actual use. You know, Penn Street has some rental units. Our applicant owns rental units in our neighborhood, and it would be, you know, whether the applicant is going to rent the property or not rent the property, I guess is a question, but it would be of a concern to me to add yet another rental to this property. And I think that, you know, again, we're all speaking about how much can be put and work on one piece of property. Stormwater is also a concern. You know, there's a storm drain right, you know, across the street from our house, right at the end of the property we're speaking about. How will that be managed and for the best for the neighborhood? So those are my concerns.
All right, thank you. Anyone else who got certified mail who'd like to speak? Anyone who got regular mail who'd like to speak? Ma'am, want to come up?
Yes, it will. Thank you.
Can you
My
state
name
your name
is
and address?
Marjorie Brennan, Marjorie, Brennan. I live at 859 Penn Street, and my concern is with the applicant herself because she rehabbed a house 10 feet from mine, and during that time, and I've been here before to say this, she did not get any permits, and when I confronted her, she said she didn't need any. She bumped out the 3rd floor, put in a bathroom, put in an air conditioning unit, and berated me for calling codes. So my concern is,
I'm going to object to this. I don't think it's relevant. I just wanted to go on record with that objection.
Understood.
So if you do grant this applicant a variance, I just would like to go on record that I would love to make sure that our codes department keeps an eye on it and makes sure that she follows the rules, because she doesn't. And her men working on the house have bragged, they rehabbed her house on Railroad without one permit. And I said to them, you probably shouldn't tell me that. And in a final statement, she has said to me, you better be careful, I know people. Well, I know you people, and I know you're very diligent, and I thank you for that.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who received regular mail who would like to testify tonight? All right, anyone else who would like to testify tonight?
Yes, I do. I'm Lynn Elliott, 704 Polo Road, Bryn Mawr. I live a couple of blocks from the property in question. And I just want to say I support everything that the zoning officer, Kelly Kirk, stated, as well as the other neighbors who testified. And I also have an exhibit, and I think Margie didn't actually say anything about this, but this is actually the lot in question. Can I have an exhibit?
You do need to show it to Mr. Fromhold first.
Oh, he has his own copy. Oh, do I have to show you this first? Sorry, yours is black and white.
And Mr. Sutton, right?
And, yeah, actually, and Mr. Sutton, my apology.
Oh, you know what? You can have my copy. So this is, just one. This is the property in question. This is a photograph I took.
If you could, in front of the mic, that'll help. Thanks.
This is a photograph I took on June 16th of 2019 of 835 Penn Street, the property in question. It shows the entire lot covered in weeds that had been growing for week after week after week. And the fence is approximately 51 inches, and I say that because the fence comes up to about here, and when I got home from my walk, I measured up to there. So these weeds are almost at the top of the fence line. These had been growing for a long, long time. And I just want to say that this is not a mom and pop property owner who might have a lawnmower that's on the fritz. From what the research I did, she owns at least 17 properties in the Haverford, Radnor, and Lower Merion Township. She's clearly aware of her responsibilities as a property owner.
And I apologize for interrupting you, but I object again for the record to this. I don't believe it's relevant.
Understood. Thank you.
To me, this shows a level of disregard and disrespect for the neighborhood that I find disappointing and surprising in someone who last year applied to get a variance and obviously knew she was bringing the case again this year. I would have thought that she would make more of an effort to maintain the property in accordance of what neighbors would expect in this area. I also would just like to state a couple of the code provisions under Statement of Intent, Section 182.201, Paragraph G, to promote the most desirable use of land. To me, this is not the most desirable use of land. This is overcrowding of land. And in Section 182.102, community objectives, A, to promote, protect, and facilitate proper density of population, and B, to prevent overcrowding of land. It seems to me that this proposal goes against both of these objectives. And to add on to what Mr. Sutton said, in terms of the 12-foot front yard setback, it seems to me that if this is in fact its own principal use. It's been stated it's not an accessory use. It should have the standard 25-foot rear yard and 20-foot front yard added to the distance between where the building ends and where the new lot in front of it would begin, which would mean adding 45 feet to the front of it since its rear yard is at 0. With the new lot, they would also have to have 45 feet, and that covers the entire lot all the way to the sidewalk, leaving no room for the building. In addition, Mr. Fromhold said that the C6 or the R6 setbacks should not apply, and I wondered if it would be more applicable to use the C4 requirements, since that's the district where a commercial garage is actually a by right use. This would entail a 75-foot road frontage, 25-foot front and rear yards, and 20-foot side yards each. That's more restrictive than R6. And our code, section 182-106, interpretation of regulations, says that when there is, I don't want to read the whole thing, but as particularly referred to area and bulk regulations and impose higher standards, the most restrictive requirement shall govern. So the zoning board is authorized to impose the most restrictive measures possible if indeed nothing else applies, if the R6 isn't applicable. And then lastly, I just want to add on to what Ms. Kirk said, where it says that oh, yes, this is it. That in section 182-713 about modification of existing lots, where it says that any proposed building must comply in all respects with the area and other requirements. It's not area and bulk requirements, it's other requirements. That could be anything, including use requirements. And as Mr. Fromhold pointed out, commercial garages are not a permitted use in an R6 district. This commercial garage is allowed to continue as long as there is no modification of the lot. But once the lot is modified, then it seems to me that this paragraph requires the garage to comply with the use standards for R6, meaning it has to become a private garage and an accessory use that's subordinate to the principal use, which is the twin rental house. So this garage will have to be rented only to whoever rents the twin house, because only then is it an accessory use. It can no longer be a commercial garage rented separately to multiple entities. I hope the board does not allow this lot to be modified, but if it does, then the garage should be required to change from a commercial garage to a private garage and be able to be rented only by the person living in the twin house. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Actually, I have more of a question than a testimony, but. I do. My name is Kathleen Case, and I'm Kathleen with a K, Case with a C. I'm on the steering committee for the Bryn Mawr.
What's your address?
121 County Line Road in Bryn Mawr. And I'm on the steering committee for the Brynford Civic Association, so I'm speaking about concerns that involve the neighborhood that include Penn Street and the kinds of things we hear at our meetings now about complaints about non-conforming zoning. According to the last comprehensive plan for the township and a survey done by the Pannoni, I believe, our area of the township has more non-conforming zoning than any area of the township. At that time, there were 28 non-conforming zoning things. I have not counted how many there are now, because things have changed in that time, but I guarantee there aren't fewer. And at every meeting we have, that's what the complaints are about non-conforming zoning, including this commercial garage. So it's my understanding, and I'm not an expert in zoning like Lynn is and some others here, but that the goal is to get rid of non-conforming zoning eventually over time. And in the past, great amounts of it were granted in our area of the township. I have no idea why, and I've lived there for 40 years. So my question, I guess, to this group is how is allowing a further chop up of this property and that does nothing about the non-conforming zoning, helping the non-conforming zoning situation in our area? As Lynn just pointed out, it actually isn't. If that garage were disappearing and two houses that were going to be occupied by their owners, because the other problem we have in our area is, in some cases, a third or more of each of the streets are now turning to rental properties. And that's perfectly legal, nothing wrong with that, but those properties are usually treated somewhat differently in terms of maintenance than by the people if the owners live there, and that's just a fact. So, and I would worry that this subdivision, which will probably be another rental property, may not have just two cars there because we don't know how many apartments or how many people it might be rented to. So my biggest concern is the non-conforming zoning in the Brynford area. So this does nothing to abate that.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I do. Doreen Saar, DOREENSAAR, and I live on Rugby Road. I wanted to point out two quick items, and I know you're all impressed by our neighbors who are all so up on zoning and issues. The first is that the use that is of the garage has never met 76.2. That is the assurance that all non-residential development is environmentally compatible with adjacent uses with respect to levels of noise, vibration, glare, emissions, blah, 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 and that the township is called upon to examine such properties regularly. And I think if these properties were examined, you would see that they would not be compatible with the residential activity there and not meet the accepted performance standards. The second issue is the easement issue. First of all, in the definition of a minor subdivision, it says the division of a single lot, blah, 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 is provided that the proposed lots, parcels, or tracts of land have frontage, et cetera, and that there is not created by the subdivision any new street or streets, need for required improvements, easement of access, or the need therefore. In fact, this subdivision requires easement of access, and I would say that the access that is shared through the driveway extends the existing use of the garage, and in fact is an infringement on the new property. So that without the easement, the existing garage the garage as a commercial property cannot exist. So that in itself is a mark that this should not be granted. And I want to thank my neighbors for all of their work, and I thank you for listening to us endlessly as we come back all the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to speak? All right, Counselor, do you want to close? And Ms. Sutton, you'll have this equal opportunity.
I do, thank you. just bothered me that it was on an angle, and I was trying to straighten it and made it worse. There were a lot of incoming arguments, and I'd like to address them if I may. The first argument was about the side yard, rear yard for the new lot. I think that under the definitions of yard and what constitutes a front yard, both of these lots have front yards, and both of those front yards are measured as setbacks from Penn Street. Once you get past and beyond, you're dealing with side yards. Until you get to the rear of the lot, you're dealing with the rear yard. So that the yard that is created for Lot 2, the new single-family home, behind the house, that is a rear yard from the house itself to the lot line that is in front of the garage. That is a rear yard from the house going back. But from the garage forward to the new lot, Lot 2, that's by definition of a side yard. So that Lot 1 would have multiple side yards, not just 2 side yards. And that's not uncommon when you have lots with additional lot lines where they're not rectangular lots. So that would be point number one. Point number two, when I tried to clarify that this building is not an accessory building, really that doesn't make any difference. Whether it was an accessory building under the code as a private garage or whether it is a commercial garage, in either case, with the building having its physical presence abutting the lot lines, it's non-conforming to the side and rear yard. And the question is it a non-conforming accessory building? The answer is no, it's just a non-conforming commercial building. But in either case, you're not extending the non-conformity, you're not altering the non-conforming building, you're not altering the non-conforming use. And obviously, since this is an appeal from a determination of the zoning officer, we have a respectful disagreement with the manner in which the zoning officer has interpreted the code. We think that the non-conforming use provisions, when you go back to 802, they say you may continue your non-conforming use, but they do prohibit. They say you may not extend it or enlarge it or add to it in any way. We haven't extended the use that's non-conforming, which is the commercial garage use. We haven't altered that building in any way, enlarged that building in any way. So therefore, we believe that we comply with both the permission that is granted and guaranteed by Section 802, which is the continuation of that non-conforming use. And we also comply in the sense that we haven't done anything here that would enlarge it. And I respectfully submit that having this on a lot that is smaller than now exists, but a lot which still complies with all of the requirements of the code, is not an enlargement of the nonconformity. The building coverage provisions that apply don't apply to particular buildings. They apply to buildings in total on a lot. Impervious coverage provisions don't apply to particular areas of impervious coverage or buildings or anything else. They say, does the lot meet this overall percentage? And both of these lots comply with the overall percentage. We're not dealing with an enlargement of the use in any fashion whatsoever. So disagree with that, and I'm going to make a point at the very end that I think will really drive that home. But the suggestion was this is a panhandle lot. And I would respectfully submit to you that if you look at the definition of panhandle lot, and it is a defined term in the code, that this is not a panhandle lot. Both of these lots provide the full required lot width at the street line for their respective uses. For the single-family detached dwelling on Lot 2, full lot width is provided for the single-family semi-detached building that will continue to exist on Lot 1. The full lot width is provided so that we submit that there is no violation of any zoning ordinance or any applicable subdivision ordinance. I know there was a suggestion that the front yard setback not be as deep on Lot 2, the new home, as is proposed in order to meet that larger setback that is code required. Were we to comply with that request, and I'm not suggesting it's an unreasonable request, but that would require a variance from the zoning provision that says that we are to measure the average setback. So I understand the concern, but we're, in that sense, complying with the zoning requirements, and as Dennis explained, and I think the plans demonstrate, we do meet all of the required setbacks. If you look at the code and you zero in on 713B, which I think is at the heart of this case, it says, no lot shall be formed from part of a lot already occupied by a building unless the existing building and any proposed building comply in all respects. It says, with the area and other requirements of the district in which the building is located. If you look at the section itself, it's talking about the reduction or modification of lots. So you're talking about the configuration of lots, size of lots, and so forth. And then they don't say the use requirements. They say the area and other requirements. And when you look at the code, the way the code is set up in the various sections, it talks about the area and bulk requirements, and then it does have further other requirements, which are the parking requirements. So if you go to the R6 regulations, and what I had handed out to you, you'll see it has them for single-family dwelling. It has area and bulk requirements. So when 713 starts out and it talks about the area and other requirements, it could have started with the use requirements because the use is paramount to all districts. It specifically did not say use. It said the area and other. And so when you look at all the other requirements, and there are a lot of other bulk requirements, I think that is a reasonable reading of the code, that you're talking about the area and the bulk requirements. And then at the end of that, it also has, under subsection D, off-street parking regulations. So those are applicable requirements as well. We think we comply with all of those. Finally, if you sort of step back and you say, does it make sense that if you have a lot and you have a non-conforming use on that lot, that you can never subdivide it? Because that's basically where you wind up if you were to accept the interpretation of the zoning officer. And let me give you an example. If you had a 10-acre lot, and in the corner of that 10-acre lot, you had this non-conforming situation or some other non-conforming use, you couldn't put that on an acre lot and have another 9-acre lot and put a house on that other 9-acre lot. They would say, you can never subdivide that lot unless both lots comply with not only all the area and bulk requirements and other regulations of the code, but unless you eliminate the non-conforming use. So effectively, you're being asked by this interpretation to approve interpretation of the code that would say you can never subdivide a lot on which a non-conforming use is located. Whether that lot's a half an acre, 10 acres, 50 acres, you couldn't do it, even if you put what we have here on 10 acres and the other on 40 acres, because you'd still have that non-conforming use. So if that section were read and interpreted and applied in the way that has been suggested by the interpretation from which we've taken an appeal, you could never subdivide a lot of this nature. So we think that the interpretation that we have submitted to you is a reasonable one, that this particular plan complies with all of the applicable requirements of the code, and we thank you for your consideration.
I had a couple questions, if I could, just, if you don't mind, just to follow up on what you were saying. So, the garage is an existing use, is that right?
Correct.
And so, by suggesting that area and others, it's really talking about area and bulk, or maybe area, bulk, and parking, but not use, then you're kind of writing out the concept of existing uses from the definition of enlargement, aren't you?
I appreciate your asking that question because I wanted to make one more point, and if I can make it in answering your question. When you look at the R6 regulations, it says, under B, on use, it says you've got uses by right, you've got conditional uses, you've got uses by special exception, but you've also got the section of the code, 802, that says lawful uses may be of land, may be of building of land, may be continued. So there's a guarantee that you can continue that non-conforming use. So I would say that a fair reading of the R6 regulations are that you can have certain uses by right, you have certain uses by conditional use, you have certain uses by special exception, and you have the constitutionally guaranteed right to continue any non-conforming uses that you may have on that land or on that lot. So if you read it that way and you accept the constitutional protection that is given to the non-conforming uses, and you read 713, I think 713 is talking about configuration of lots, sizes of lots, so that you don't wind up with more on the lot in terms of all of the bulk requirements and the coverages and the setbacks and so forth. You don't create any nonconformities in that fashion, and I submit to you that we don't. So I would say that we actually comply with all of the applicable requirements in the R6 district. We're permitted the by right uses, the special exception conditional uses, and continued nonconforming uses.
So, of course, you've heard testimony that the applicant can continue to use their property as they like right now,
Correct.
right? So no one's suggesting that they can't.
Correct.
But you are suggesting then that the language in enlargement, that an increase in that portion of attractive land occupied by an existing use, which you just testified you have, that we should ignore that language
I'm sorry, which section?
in the definition of enlargement, that we should ignore everything after the word or an increase in that portion of attractive land occupied by an existing use, which you just said we have an existing use, but we should ignore that phrase.
All right. If you forgive me, you just give me the section and let me take a more careful look. It's section 802B.
It's 802.106 in the definition of enlargement.
All right, let me just. Says an addition of floor area, it's not, of an existing building, an increase in the size of another structure, it's not, or an increase in the portion of the land occupied by an existing use, okay? We're not increasing the portion of the land occupied by the existing use. The existing use is still located on the same portion of the land. If you think about that 100-acre example I gave you, you'd say, well, if you want to divide it into 90 acres and 10 acres, you're increasing the portion of the land on which that's located because you're reducing the overall acreage of the property. I don't think that, I respectfully submit that isn't a way to interpret
I
it.
was just asking if you thought.
Yeah, no,
we should not
it's
be
good, it's a good question.
Any questions, Mr. Sutton? Do you want to close with anything?
I would be. Thank you. So respectfully, we're not talking about a 100-acre tract of land here. We're not talking about a 10-acre tract of land here. we're talking about an approximately 16,000 square foot piece of property. There currently is one lot that contains two uses. And the applicant proposes to create two lots containing three uses, one of which continues to be a non-conforming use. I think this is absolutely an enlargement of the use. You're not only enlarging it by adding another use on top of the two existing uses, you're reducing the setbacks on what is proposed to be Lot 1. The area between the front of the existing commercial garage and the street is no longer open space, but is now shown on the plan as having a 12-foot setback, whereas before it was a much longer distance. You're also increasing, as the board has pointed out itself, the percentage of the lot that's occupied by the non-conforming use when you look at the newly proposed Lot 1. I respect that the applicant has also pointed out that panhandle lot is specifically defined in the ordinance. However, if you look at section 182, 706A6, it says no panhandle or flag lot shall be created within the township. Although panhandle lot is defined, a flag lot is not. And if you're following conventional rules of statutory construction and giving meaning to every word in the ordinance, you have to consider that the drafters of the ordinance specifically intended to use those words. And where panhandle is defined, flag is not. And therefore, the drafters of the ordinance must have specifically meant to include a broader definition that includes not just the defined panhandle lot, but also a broader category of a flag-shaped lot. Finally, the applicant made reference to section 182.713 and the fact that it referred to the area and other requirements. I would only submit to the board that other means other. It doesn't mean bulk. If the drafters of the ordinance intended that that section was only meant to refer to the area and bulk requirements, it would have said area and bulk requirements. And finally, the applicant has made a few constitutional arguments about the property owner's right to maintain an existing nonconformity and or subdivide the property. And again, the ordinance permits both, frankly. If the applicant wants to maintain the nonconforming use, the applicant always has the choice of not subdividing the property. If the applicant wants to subdivide the property, the applicant has the option of eliminating the nonconforming use, which again is consistent with the law and policy in Pennsylvania of disfavoring nonconforming uses and eliminating them as quickly as possible. Thank you.
All right, any other questions from the board?
No.
Okay.
If I could just take 15 seconds, I think to address the question of flag lot, I think the common understanding of flag lot is where you have a narrow leg that goes back to a lot that doesn't provide the required lot width of a street, the pole, if you will, that goes back. So I submit panhandle is actually a broader concept than flag, and this is neither. Thank you.
Okay. All right, with that, we will close this case and we will attempt to render a decision at our next regularly scheduled meeting, which is set for February 6, 2020 at 7:45 p.m.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
7:30.
7:30, I'm sorry. So we still have a few cases, so if you guys want to head out and chat, please do out in the lobby. Okay, while we wait for Ed to come back, the next item on the agenda is item Z19-32. Eric and Amy Gorman, owners of 1,000 Carroll Road in Wynwood, Pennsylvania, folio number 220800015600, requesting a variance from section 182-727C4 to erect a 4-foot-high split rail fence in their primary front yard of a corner property. The property is zoned R4 and is in the 8th Ward. Will you both plan to testify?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll have you both sworn in separately, right? And just remember that we have one stenographer, so it's helpful not to both speak at the same time. Sure. Okay. And so will you each individually state your name and your address for the record?
Sure. Amy Gorman, AMY, 1,000 Carroll Road, Wynwood.
And Eric Gorman, ERIC, and GORMAN, 1000 Carroll Road.
Bill, do you want to explain?
Yes.
The four-member board?
So we are a 5-member board, but one board member was unable to be here today. As such, there are typically 3 choices that you can go through. One would be to request a continuance when all 5 could be here. One would be to allow the 5th member to read the transcript and vote upon the reading of that transcript. And one would be to proceed with a 4-member board. You have to be cautioned that with a 4-member board, if it is a split vote, meaning 2-2, that would result in a denial. It's not an approval with a tie, it's a denial with a tie. My suggestion typically is to allow the 5th member to read the transcript and proceed, but that is certainly your choice.
Yeah, we let the 5th person
5th
read
member,
it and
5-member,
decide.
thank you.
Please.
Okay, thank you. You have put up a picture. Do you have, we're going to have to submit exhibits, anything you want to officially become part of the record of this case?
Yeah, so that is on, it's in our paperwork. That is section, oh, I'm sorry. It's section 2, page 2. So the
Okay.
back of the application for permit.
Right, so those are not officially marked in our applications as exhibits, but we'll probably take a minute here and let Bill help you take a set of them and mark them as exhibits so they can be formally part of the record. Do you have an extra copy of those that
I
you
do.
don't
We have-
need in your hands to refer to constantly?
Yeah, do you, yeah, we have copies.
Okay.
Well, what I have, let me do it this way first.
Sure.
Is I have a set of documents with exhibits 1 through 8, which were pre-marked by you. Exhibit 1 was your request for a variance that was filled out and submitted. Is that correct?
Correct.
Exhibit 2 is your application for a permit, which predated your application for a variance. Is that correct?
Correct.
Exhibit 3 is a document which is listed as measurements with pictures of the property. And what I see here for Exhibit 3 is a 3-page document, the first page of which is what appears to be the front of 1000 Carroll Road on the top. The second picture, which is the bottom of page 1 of Exhibit 3, is the view of your house from the side yard. Going to page 2 is a picture on the top, again, looking at your house, but further to the right, which also, to the very far right, shows your neighboring property. Exhibit 4 is a depiction or a picture on the bottom, still Exhibit 3, but Picture 4, which is the bottom picture on page 2 of the exhibit, appears to be a depiction of the side of your property abutting,
So
if I'm correct, that same neighbor?
That's the rear of the, that's the actual rear of the house.
That's the rear of the house, okay.
Yeah.
And then the third page seems to be a
Yeah.
Google map, but is actually quite non-specific. Is that a fair
So
statement?
it's basically just showing that we're the corner. So if
Right.
you're looking at the house, that's Cowell Road, our address,
Understood.
and then Farwood's the other.
Exhibit 4 is one page of photographs, which are just pictures of some trees and things in your yard, which you labeled right yard obstructions. Is that correct?
Correct.
Exhibit 5 is a depiction of the proposed fence.
Right.
And that's, again, a one-page document. Exhibit 6 is a document which is 3 pages long of neighbors who have indicated their support for your application. Exhibit 7 is a 3-page exhibit with 5 pictures of corner lots in your general vicinity that have fences that are in either their primary or secondary front yard.
Right.
And Exhibit 8 is your deed. Now, what I do not see, and you have up on the board here, is an exhibit which is not contained in this
It
packet.
is. So if you go to Exhibit 2, it's the model they make you draw on the second page of Exhibit 2.
Right, but
It's
that's a
just-
separate drawing. That's not the same thing that's attached to
It's the
Exhibit 2.
same, everything's the same, it's just the scale, because this is a square portrait.
What I'm getting at is I understand that it represents the same thing, but it's a separate drawing.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
so we're going to stop for a second. We're simply going to mark that as Exhibit A9.
A9, okay, sure.
Do you have
A loose copy of
a
it?
loose copy of that or anything else of that, or is that the sole one?
That's it.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to mark it as Exhibit A9. I'm going to scan it and provide it to all the board members. So we're going to go off the record for a minute.
Okay, sure, thank you.
Yes, yeah.
All right, we'll go back on the record now. Thank you. So you now have Exhibit A9, which I'm going to presume will be the basis for much of the testimony?
Yeah, it's because it's the scale, so yeah, it's more accurate. Yep.
Okay. All you, whatever you want to say, whatever you want to talk
All right.
about.
And then does everyone have a copy? I brought extras in case anything got lost. Everyone has?
We have copies of all
Okay, you
the
do.
other exhibits.
All right, good. All right, so basically, as you said, we're looking to do a split rail fence in what is called our primary front yard. So split rail fence would have 3 rails with 1 by 6 inch rails. There's the example of that, as you saw, is on Exhibit 5, just an example of that fence type. We chose this design to allow for the most visibility for cars and pedestrians on the corner. So my wife Amy spoke to Kelly, and basically to make sure that we abide by the right-of-way regulations for our home, which is 20 feet from the center of the road to the start of the fence. So Exhibit 2, page 2, just going to follow along with you. The Exhibit 2, page 2 shows, so on the Cowell Road side, so this is Cowell Road on the bottom here, going left to right. On the Cowell Road side, the fence begins 7 foot 6 inches from the property line, so that allows for the proper right-of-way. It comes out to 20 feet 3 inches of right-of-way, so you only need 20. And then the same goes for the Farwood side, so this is Farwood Road on the left here, going top to bottom. So on the Farwood side, also on Exhibit 2, page 2, the fence begins 6 feet from the property line, so that also allows for the 20-foot right-of-way from the center of the road to the start of the fence, and that is 20 foot 10 inches, so 10 inches more there. And then just noting that 20-foot right-of-way rule is for properties that don't have a sidewalk, and we don't have a sidewalk. So I don't know what it is for the others, but just specifying that 20 foot is a no sidewalk property, which is us. And then I listed some reasons for the relief sought. So our backyard, as you saw on Exhibit 3, page 2, it's just the 8-foot gap in the back of the house, so it's not feasible to put anything there. And then the primary, so basically the right side of the house is where you see on Exhibit 4. So Exhibit 4 shows the obstructions that are on that side of the house. So there's 2 very large and healthy ash trees that are in the way. And then along with that, there's a shed in the top right corner. And then along with the driveway, there's a sidewalk that connects the driveway, runs along that side of the entire right side of the house, and connects it to the back of the house. And then the sidewalk runs all along there. So there's a lot of obstructions on the right side of the house. It's also only 30 feet wide. So in comparison to the other side, it's less than half the width of the side that we're proposing to do the fence on.
And we have a 80-pound dog. His name's Bruno. He's a Great Dane Black Lab mix. He's extremely friendly, but we have a ton of kids in our neighborhood, and right here on the corner of our property is a bus stop, as well as directly across the street on Farwood is another bus stop. So we fear that if the dog's in the yard, a lot of the neighborhood kids love him. We don't want anyone to cross the street to come and see him. We don't want any accidents. We don't want him to run into the street. And if you cross our property on the Farwood, right here is Carroll Park. Swing set, it's a playground. Same concerns. We don't want anyone crossing the street to come see our friendly dog if there's no fence there. We tried an electric fence for 4 months. And didn't comprehend it at all. He's 80 pounds, just ran right through it. So that was a concern for us. We also are first-time parents in June, so same concerns with our child. It's a very busy intersection, constantly buses in the morning, buses in the afternoon, kids playing touch football. It's a great neighborhood, but there's always kids, and we don't want our dog to be in the yard and anyone to cross the street to come and say hi to him, and vice versa. We spoke to our neighbors. A lot of our neighbors are in agreement. No one gave us a hard time. And the neighbor that we share the property line with right here, they also wrote a letter, and they had a fence put in about a month ago somewhere else in their yard, but they had their property surveyed, and they left the markers up for us right here, so we know exactly where the property line is.
And just to say, the direct neighbor, they're in Exhibit 6. The first letter, the Von Andre family, that's the direct neighbor on the Farwood side.
305.
To the rear.
Exactly, yeah, right.
Yes.
So that's the first one. We put them first there for a reason. That's really it. So then, obviously, if you guys have questions or anything.
Jess, you want to start?
Sure. I'm assuming the split rail fence that you're putting up is going to have the mesh behind it that you showed in the picture?
Right,
So
right,
you can't jump
yes.
through? Okay. Did you give any consideration to lining the fence up with the front of your house instead of bringing it all the way to the street? So it would still be partially in your front yard, except the front of it would jump back 19 feet to line up with your house.
You mean just this area here?
Yeah, taking that out
Oh,
and
removing
leaving
that.
the back, yeah.
So, I just want to make sure I'm following you. So, not using this area, but only using this area?
Correct. Almost that where you drew your measurement for the center line of the street.
Yeah, like this section?
Yep.
Well, if I understand the code properly, and it's very easily that I don't, I think the code reads that this is the section that's, what's the terminology?
Secondary.
Yeah, so the,
Okay.
so
Secondary
the secondary front yard would read, as far as I know, that the front of our house is actually fair game.
Okay.
So really, the variance would be using what we technically can use and adding this section. So that's kind of, to what I know, that's the variance that we're looking to.
Kelly, can you just confirm which is the primary and secondary?
Sure, I
You
was
want me
just
to turn
trying to do some math, actually, yeah, if I could,
sure.
that'd be great, thanks. My internet's not working. So which, on here is,
So
Farwood is which one?
this is Farwood,
That's Farwood, okay.
and this is Calvin.
So for you, Farwood is your primary front yard because it's directly adjacent to your rear yard, which is provided where that 30 feet is.
Wait,
Um,
Kelly, so
So
their
no-
house enters, their front door is on Carroll and their house street is on Carroll.
Doesn't matter. Their primary front yard's provided for on Farwood. And their minimum side yard setback, that 8 feet, is directly adjacent to Carroll. So automatically, Farwood is their primary frontage and Carroll is their secondary frontage. The builder just put the house, or put the door where they felt like it.
So then by right, the fence in the secondary front yard, where can that start by right?
They could start at the right-of-way on, I'm sorry, Carroll.
So this is the section that would be permitted?
Yes, anything from the center of the road, 20 feet up on Carroll, is permitted to be fenced. And on Farwood, it would be, there's a, actually, the right-of-way is, I've never seen this before, 46 feet. So half of that's 23, so from the center of the road, the 23 feet plus your 30-foot front yard setback. So a total of 53 feet from the center of Carroll.
Oh, so 53 feet from the center of Carroll.
I'm sorry, wait, is that?
Yes, Carroll's,
I wish you'd mark those.
so Carroll runs left to right, so this is Carroll,
Sure.
and this is Farwood. So we have the 20-foot setback, center of the road, 20 feet in is where we have this map. So this red line is our fence. So this gives 20 feet.
Position this for the camera. So
You have to pull it forward, Kelly. The camera can't pan in on it.
Thanks. Okay, so this is your primary front yard here. So 53 feet from the center of,
This is the center of the road.
right, the center of the street, which street is this? Farwood?
That's Farwood,
That's
right.
Farwood.
So 53 feet from the center of Farwood to here, to wherever that goes,
Okay.
and 20 feet from the center of Carroll. So 20 feet from here.
Yeah, so this runs this runs 20 feet, 3 inches. So we're covered on this one.
All right, so this is 20 feet here. Okay, so all of this is good. And then wherever 53 feet lands on this side.
Did that change from when we met a couple months ago? Because when
Unless
you
we
looked
had
it
the
up-
Because
streets,
we were under the assumption it was 20 and 20.
Yeah.
until I saw your deed, that's what our information isn't always correct with the right-of-ways. I'm sure I said I say this to everybody, I repeat it 50 times a day. The deed is always your most accurate information for your right-of-way. The tax map shows that it was 40.
Yeah.
And as I had said just now, I've never seen a 46-foot right-of-way before in my life, but it says it on your deed, so that's what it is.
So it would be 3 feet more.
It's an additional 3 feet.
Okay.
So Kelly, the red line depicted by the applicant here along Carroll is properly placed, at least on a relative basis.
This portion,
Yes,
yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the
And the
point.
only difference is that the red line that runs vertical on Exhibit A9 on the Farway side of the road should be pulled in 3 feet.
No, I'm not sure what the distance is.
This
from
is,
here.
so 20 foot, 10 inches right of way exists here.
Okay, so that's 20 feet, so you need an additional 30 from there. Well, and then just realizing now that your right-of-way is actually 46 and not 40. An additional.
So it's not half of that? It's not 23?
It's 46, so it is 23, yeah.
Okay, so
Oh, so it's
3 more
23.
feet.
Okay, yeah,
3 more.
so this is 20 feet, 10 inches to the fence.
Right.
So we'd have to add 2 foot 2 inch.
To clear the right of way,
Okay.
which is the easement area.
So yeah, so what?
So that in addition to your 30-foot front yard setback.
If it was to comply with
With the zoning
the
code.
zoning code, yes.
I'm confused with the last part. So we have this is 20 foot 10, center of the road.
That's the right of way. That's as far, if they were to give you a variance, they were to grant that, that's as much as they can give you.
Right.
Is to the right of way. They can't let you put it in the right of way.
Okay, but then you're saying how much further in would the fence have to come?
If it were by right, you're just get a permit, another 30 feet from there.
Okay.
So you're basically applying for a 30-foot variance.
Okay,
So I just wanted to be clear on
Okay.
what was by right and what you need a variance
thank you.
Well, just to be clear, and there's no argument here, it's the 30-foot variance, but it's also the variance into the back as we go up on Exhibit A9 on Farwood.
This section.
Correct.
That's my understanding.
Yes. So it's a portion of the area on Carroll in front of the house, and then that entire section behind that center line that you wrote all the way to the rear of your house. Does everyone get that?
Yes.
All right.
It's like an L shape.
So
Right away is different.
So the variance that's requested is for a section. So on Farwood, there is an indication for right in saying center of road. And there's a line that goes from center of road to the house. Going down from that line on Exhibit A9, there would be a section that would need a variance out to Farwood. Then the entire piece that is above that center line is also subject to a need for a variance. So you basically have, as Jessica stated, an L shape, almost like, as the past case, a flag lot. There's that section that would need a variance. So there's really this area here above that center line, and then a portion of this 30 feet in on the Farwood Road side.
Is that right?
I'm
deferring to her.
deferring to you.
Kelly, can you draw the line all the way up?
Yeah, you can draw. I mean,
What's
you can
allowed?
draw. That's fine.
Off the record, one second.
Red
Not
line,
back out.
2 feet, 2 inches
Yeah.
toward the house.
All right, now we're back on.
Yes, that's correct.
So, Bill, for the record, do you want to summarize the clarification that we just talked about where the variance versus the by right?
Sure, so the clarification is, we have on Exhibit A9 a red line with an indication of 51 foot, which goes up and down on Farwood. That would have to move in 30 feet from left to right,
33 feet.
33 feet from left to right. And if you drew an imaginary line down, the area to the right of that would be allowable by right. So what we're looking at is the 33 feet from that imaginary line going left towards Farwood,
Is the
subject to the variance request.
is-
That's the variance
is
request.
variance request. Okay. Jess, anything else?
No further questions.
Good question.
Ed?
Okay, the question that didn't get answered then is why can't you do that? Move it back so you don't need the variance.
So we wanted it just to be bigger because we could move it in the 30, whatever that number is, feet. But we have an 80-pound dog, so we wanted just more space for him because we have all of that land.
Yeah, so just really just maximizing the use of the size of that yard. If we're doing the fence, to us, it made the most sense to just maximize what we could within the right of way and within reason to just, like Amy said, to just get as much ground fenced in as we could.
And what was the height of the split rail fence?
4 feet, so 48 inches.
I have no other.
Ben?
No question.
So I have a couple questions. Is there a reason that you wouldn't include, in order to give yourself more space, put the fence along your back property, or your side property line, opposite of Carroll, and then down along the neighbor on, who would be depicted on the right side of Exhibit A9?
So this area.
And the rear, that rear strip of land behind your house, or on the, what they call the side yard,
Add it to.
included in the fenced area?
So,
There's a lot.
so you're saying this, what we're requesting, and then around and back?
Well, you just suggested that you would like the variance to give you more space.
Right.
And we've seen in exhibits, I'm sorry, bear with me here. Yeah, I'm sorry. So we've seen in Exhibit 4 that you have a side yard with a hammock, some trees. And we've seen in one of the other pictures, you know, a fairly narrow strip behind your house that could be included in the fence. You could fence in. Is there, let me start with this question. Where's the other egress from your house? You have a front door.
Yeah, so the porch here.
Yep.
So there's a front door here.
Yep.
And then there's a porch door.
Okay.
And then the porch door to get out of the screening porch is right here.
Okay.
So in
Yeah.
theory, if we got this fence approved, that would incorporate, you walk out the porch door and you're
Yeah.
in the fenced-in area.
Got it.
That's,
Okay.
that's also part of why I chose that side.
Fair enough. So in order to maximize your space within your own right, you could fence further down your side yard, which you called the rear of your house.
Right.
And you could fence to within, what distance, Kelly, from the right edge of the boundary?
They can go right up.
Right up to the boundary. And then you could connect it, draw it back to the edge of your house, right in front of your driveway.
So just to run, so this area, run it back here, hug the border, and then meet
come-
the front of the house. We could, but
And you wouldn't need a variance for that.
well, it would be,
You would only need a variance for encroaching into the 30-foot setback of your front yard.
yeah, so the reason that we're trying to avoid that side of the house entirely is the obstructions. There's the trees, there's the sidewalk, there's like an air conditioning vent, the hammock, there's a shed. And then the back of the house, if you're the brick wall that ends our home, there's 8 feet, there's sidewalk back there too. That's not grass, that's not mulch, that's all sidewalk and cement.
You could put a gate through the fence to allow you to continue to use that sidewalk though, right?
I'm not sure that I
We
follow.
could. I guess we just thought this made more sense instead of doing the whole thing. We
Yeah, I
just
mean,
thought this was.
If we were able to do what we
easier.
wanted to do, that's enough. And that way it incorporates the porch and the side door and just the flow.
It just strikes me that there's exactly a 30-foot wide rear yard, right? And you're asking for a variance to go into the 30-foot setback of your front yard, when it seems that you might have the space. And based on the picture, it looks like the obstructions, the trees are they're not on the property line, they're on your property.
They are.
And so you'd be able to fence those within and not need a variance.
Agreed, yeah, but the purpose, I mean, for us, if it were only for humans, that would work. But if you can see on the left side picture on what is Exhibit 4, so on the left of that sidewalk, that's all moss and greenery. So for the purposes of the dog, really, that the sidewalk and to the left of it don't really serve what we're looking to do. You know, so we're just trying to get as much open area for the dog, and for us, obviously we'll use it, but that's the most unobstructed, and it goes with the flow of the house with the shed, or, I'm sorry, with the screening porch being on the left-hand side of the house. Plus we think just curb appeal, you know, it being in the fence hypothetically being in the biggest part of the yard, the most open part of the yard, and not really crammed into the smaller side. We just think it serves us better, obviously, but aesthetically, I just think it would look better, flows better, and it just makes a little bit more sense.
You do realize that you've seen other corner lots and you've seen, you've submitted pictures of other, we generally, front yard fences are more restrained than rear and side yard fences for the opposite aesthetic that you talked about, which is to reduce the amount of fencing in people's front yards to create a more open view corridor in the streets and an open community.
Right. The only thing to that, though, is technically what we're approved for is in what we would traditionally call our front yard. That is this. So we're kind of, either way, what we would normally call a front yard, we're in that area, whether it's on the left or right side of the house.
So let me ask you another question. When people look at your lot, what do they think is your front yard?
Front door. Carol.
Yeah, like they would this, the front, because if you, I mean, this is more to scale, but it's substantially wider and it's substantially more open
Yeah.
and inviting.
Just like you could fence around the right side of this plot plan and go up and along the back of your property, that generally where that line appears that measures from the center of Faraway, 78 foot, that line, if that line were actually more or less the boundary for your fence, and we treated Carroll as your front yard, and you treated the frontage onto Faraway as your side yard, and you fenced essentially the back half of your rectangular property, would you be amenable to that?
So I just want to draw it on here. So you're, sorry.
Because if we, in theory, the variance could be that we're essentially switching the view of your house, the front yard concept.
So when you suggest that, I'm just confused as to how, is the 78 feet you're referring to is the center of the road to the side of the house. So what portion are you?
So let's just presume for a minute that black line you just had your hand on was actually your fence. That it went from the house to the red line and then up and then all the way across the back
Oh, all the way.
and then down to your and then turned in at your edge of your driveway and came right back into the house. Because if you just said that people view your front yard differently than legally it's viewed. Right? People view your front yard as the portion of your property that your front door walks out onto. Rather than this large yard, which in theory, maybe it's a large side yard. And if we are saying, connect your fence to the front edge of your house in this new Carroll front yard and go to your side yards and around your back, would that be acceptable to you? Because that might be another way to consider this.
And you wouldn't have to go into your back or side yard. That would just be if you wanted more
Yeah,
space. We wouldn't
I think-
demand that you do more
require you.
spend
No,
than
no.
you have
Well,
to.
I'm trying to maximize your Bruno's run.
Yeah. He needs it.
Just
One,
one at a time, everybody. Arlene,
Oh,
only take
sorry.
out one person at a time.
So just to clarify, you're saying the front of the house.
To the right-of-way line.
you're right.
That's not the right-of-way line shown, so let's not get confused. Because it's 23 feet now instead of 20.
Well, because that's what's confusing me. The right of way on the Carroll side is 20 feet from the center of the road to the property, to the
This
fence
is
line.
treated as a side yard.
I think what we're,
That's
I
what-
think what we're talking about is Mr. Rhodes is simply suggesting or asking if a variance was to be granted, and that variance was to grant along that black line to the red line, and then moving up, and then across through the back of the house, would that serve your purpose as well? So that you would not be dealing with the 33-foot coming in from the Farwood side, if the board was to grant the variance so that that 33-foot could go out to the red line there, for lack of a better term, would that serve your purposes? I think, am I correct? Is that your question?
Yes, albeit presumably 3 feet further in from that red
Yeah,
line that's currently depicted.
That to us makes, yeah, so, yes,
So over here and 2 feet in,
right,
or 3.
Three.
3, and all the way back
And then you could go as far around as you wanted,
to the front of it.
back to the front.
yeah, I agree with that, that makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah, we'd be open to that.
That gives us something to think about as we look at this.
Yeah, definitely. Because basically, our biggest thing is incorporating the porch, that's our access to that outside. So for us, engulfing that porch and the fence is a priority. So that makes total sense in what we're trying to achieve. So I agree with that. You too, right? You both agree with that? All right.
Yes.
I don't have any other questions. I don't know. Is anyone else?
No.
No other questions.
No question.
All right, I have to ask if there's anyone here who would like to speak who received certified mail? Anyone who received regular mail? Anyone else who's here who'd like to speak about this applicant or application? All right, so with that, we'll close this record and we will attempt to reach a decision at our next meeting, which is on February 6th. You can attend if you want. If you don't or can't attend, don't want to, you could call Kelly the next day and you can find out what the result was.
Okay.
So, thank you.
All right, and then quick question, if we come, do we speak again, or is it strictly
No,
decision?
the
Okay,
record's closed,
got it,
so it's right now down to a decision.
okay. Yeah, then, you have
Do you
anything
keep
else?
this? Yes. Okay.
Yep, and we, as you saw tonight, we do decisions first, and then we hear continued cases and new cases. So the decision will be at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay,
Great.
all right, well, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
You said you keep that, right? Yes. Okay, want to bring it over? Credit for Amy did this.
What was the name of that partner? We'll say on here, so. Thank you.
Just give me 1 second, I just want to make a note. Okay, for the record, the next case, new case, is Z19-33. Philip and Laurel Drucker, owners of 509 Fairmount Road in Havertown, Pennsylvania, folio number 2201-0040200, who request a variance from section 182-206 of the zoning code to construct an enclosed porch, thereby encroaching into the side yard setback by 3 feet. The property is zoned R4 and is in the first ward. I presume you are Mr. Drucker?
Yes, I am. Philip Drucker.
Mr. Drucker, before we start, we'll have to have you sworn in.
I do.
Okay, Mr. Drucker, if you would, you are, and you currently live at 509?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So do you, you've seen what we've discussed tonight. We have a 4-member board. Do you want us to go over your options again?
No, we'll opt to let the 5th member hear the testimony.
Okay, read the transcript?
Yes, please.
Okay, and then, all right. So what would you, do you know if you're going to submit these photos and other things that were part of your application into the official record?
I
of
would
the-
like to, and I'm not sure the proper way to have done that.
So I'm going to help you out here, and then we'll mark them in a moment. But let me just ask a question or two, just so we can kind of try to expedite things. You're looking for an enclosed porch on the side of your house, is that correct?
Correct.
And you submitted a letter to the zoning hearing board asking for that, and your indication in terms of your hardship is that you have an irregularly shaped lot because it is tapered in, correct?
Correct.
And if this was not a tapered property, you would not have the issue of encroaching into the side yard setback, is that correct?
Correct.
The letter that I'm referring to is dated November 21, 2019, and I'm showing that to you. Is this that letter in which you explain that hardship?
Correct.
Okay, you're going to ask that be marked as Exhibit A1, correct?
Yes, please.
And after that, you have a photograph that's been provided to all the members of the board, which is actually not a photograph, it's more of a depiction of what the proposed sunroom would look like. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's going to be marked as Exhibit A2. You then have a picture of, written on the bottom, says next door. This is not your property, but your property to your right or left.
It is to my left.
Okay, that's going to be Exhibit A3.
Address?
If you know the address.
It's either 511 or 507, and I'm not sure which way they're going.
Okay, we'll circle back to that when we can.
507 wrote you, no, 509, 507 wrote you a letter.
Oh, that's 507.
Right, so this is 507?
Yes, that's 507. They're the ones that wrote the letter.
Okay, the next one has 509 written at the bottom.
That's me. That's our house with the white car.
Okay, so that's going to be marked as Exhibit A4. The next one says, again, next door.
Right, so.
Is that the house to the other side?
Correct,
And
to
you
our
got-
right. So we're 509, and that would be
511.
511.
All right, that's going to be marked as A5.
When you say to your right or left, you mean from
If
looking
I'm-
at the street?
I'm standing in my front door, so to the right would be the one I just said, and to the left is the people who wrote the letter, 507.
What I'm marking as Exhibit A6 is a photograph of a house with a red car under a carport.
Right, that's one down, going down, so that would be 513 Fairmont. It's just showing the carport, another home with a similar carport.
The next photograph is a house with a
Well,
pickup.
that last one, I'm sorry, you're going to mark that last one?
A6. A6. The next one is a photograph of a house with blue shutters and a pickup truck in a driveway, as
Correct.
well as a side addition. Where's that located?
It's on Circle Drive, it's behind, next block around, but in the same group of homes.
We're going to mark that as Exhibit A7. Finally, what I'm going to mark as Exhibit A8 is another house with a side addition. Is that a fair statement?
Correct, yes.
And where's that located?
That one is also on Circle.
Now, with regard to your request, you indicated that you cannot build this proposed deck and sunroom without the request for variance because of the shape of the lot. What is in that location now where you propose to put?
We have a concrete slab that is undeveloped. As you saw in some of those photographs, there were carports with roofs,
Some homes don't have anything like ours, which is just a concrete slab. Some have the sunrooms. They're all on the same footprint of that concrete slab, and our intention is also to stay within the footprint of that that existing concrete slab.
Okay, do you currently have a deck on your property?
In the backyard, yes, there's a smaller deck.
And could you replace that with a deck or a sunroom?
We are replacing the one in the back with the deck in the back is being replaced. The sunroom's going to go on the side. So we're replacing the back deck. It's unusable at this point. We're getting splinters and it's falling apart, so it needs to be replaced. And the concrete slab on the side of the house needs to be replaced and because it's cracked and we're getting water into the basement through drainage problems. And so either way, we have to work on that side of the house as well.
I'm going to show you an exhibit that I'm marking as A9, which was attached to your application. This is a sketch plan or a plot plan of your house.
Correct.
That depicts the proposed new deck in the rear, shows where the old deck is, and shows looking at your house to the right where the encroachment would be. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, that's going to be A9. Finally, Mr. Richardson referenced a letter. I have a letter dated November 24, 2019, from Michael and Devin Doty, D-O-U-G-H-T-Y. This is a letter from your neighbors who live at 507 Fairmount Road in favor of your application. Is that correct?
Correct.
We're going to mark that as Exhibit A10. I reviewed the deed and standing is appropriate, so I'm done.
Okay. Mr. Drucker, during the description of all of the exhibits, I think we got a chance to get sort of an overview of your proposed addition and replacement of your deck. Is there anything else you'd like to add to start before board members ask questions?
No. I can't think of anything to add, except to say that our proposal is congruent with all the other additions in our neighborhood. It fits the exact same footprint of all the other homes, so we thought we were in alignment with what our neighborhood looks like. And we were doing this for aesthetic and for the need for the drainage and the water we were getting in our basement. That's what sort of started this ball rolling. So I'd like to answer your questions.
Well, Ken, do you want to start? This is
Application, Bill, is it?
Z19-33.
The application is not marked as an exhibit. If you wanted to, we can.
Want to reference it?
You can reference it, but it doesn't,
Okay.
yeah. Really, the letter that was attached to it is the one we mark as A1.
The application, you indicated the change under number 5, change the right yard setback from 8 feet to 5 feet. And to allow for construction of the enclosed porch, thereby changing the side yard aggregate to 15 feet. Well, the current aggregate is 20 foot, correct?
I'm not sure. I don't know the answer to that question.
Kelly, would you know? Side yard setback aggregate?
Well, the aggregate that he's showing that he's proposing is, he has 16 on the opposite side, so he's 21 feet, so he's meeting, or slightly exceeding the required aggregate of 20 feet,
Okay.
5 foot.
Yeah, so it just, the math didn't work for me. So you went from 8 foot to 5 foot, which is 3 foot,
Right.
but then you have the total aggregate going from 20 to 15, which is 5 foot.
The contractor prepared this, and I thought it was correct, and I did not double-check the math. Everything that we had been talking about was about the 3 foot, that I was over the setback by 3 feet, so I'm not sure how to address your question, other than I didn't see it as, I didn't see the math problem.
Well, would you be willing to accept the 3 foot as a guideline that we're going by?
Is that what I've requested, is that what I need to build?
Well, it says you're reducing the side yard setback to 15, but in the same sentence, it says you're only going the 8 foot to 5 foot, which is 3 foot difference.
So you want to cross out the line that says thereby changing the side aggregate to 15? Is that incorrect? Is that what I should do? I'm not,
To my math, that should say side yard set aggregate of 17. So 20 is what you have, it's required,
okay,
and you're going into it by 3 feet.
right,
The 20 minus 3 is 17.
okay, so we should change that to
Right.
17.
Actually, wait, before you do
Sorry,
that.
do you want me to just clarify aggregate?
Yeah, it's 16, what the applicant will want is 16 plus 5.
So the minimum side yard setback is 8 feet, but it has to add up to 20 on either side. So
Right.
if you have 8 feet on one side, you need to have 12 on the other. If you have 10 on one side, you need to have 10 on the other. Even with the decreased side yard setback, with the encroachment, only leaving 5 feet, it still appears that you're adding up to 20. So I don't think we're looking for a variance from the aggregate itself, just the setback.
Oh,
And the only thing I would add is that in the event that there was a small aggregate of a foot, that it was short, Pennsylvania being a notice state, I believe that the notice is sufficient in this matter, and this board could address that if they feel there was an aggregate issue as well during this application.
And it's the same section, it's the same line of
Yes,
code, so it's
yes.
not even a separate section.
Yes, that's what I'm, yeah.
So, okay, so we have 16 on the other side of your house, and you're looking to go for as little as 5 on this side. So you're looking for, according to A9, you're looking for essentially a variance to go from the minimum 8 to a minimum of 5. That's really it, right? Okay.
That's all I have.
Does your lot only slant on the one side?
I believe that's correct, sir.
Okay, so you do have the 16, on the opposite side where you want to put this addition, you do have a minimum of 16 feet at the front of the house and the rear of the house.
Yes,
So the issue of the slant is because of the site where you want to put the addition.
yes,
You're going to be close into the minimum 8-foot setback by 3 feet.
correct.
Okay. Now, the driveway, I cannot tell by the photograph or the measurements here because they don't keep the measurements, you don't show a sidewalk. Will you have enough for 2 cars by doing this?
Yes. And the way I know that, we've already tried it. The 2 cars fit, even leaving enough for a flower bed in front of the, may I come up and show you, or? So the driveway's here, so we're looking at putting a little bit of a bed there, and we could still get the 2 cars into the driveway. The other thing we were also thinking about is widening the driveway to be able to put 2 cars next to each other.
Yeah, that's a different issue. We don't have the numbers in front of us.
Yeah, but we can, I mean, if it was a simple question, can you fit 2 cars in the condition, the answer is yes.
Okay. The question is, I don't know, by looking at the photographs that you have, that these other properties were given variance. Some of them look like they converted garages to a living space rather than they garages came with the house. Carports, yeah, that do look like that, but I can't tell you the measurements on the side, so I don't know if they're all reflective of variance or given to do that. Do you have any idea that whether they don't have 8 feet or yours is only unique because of the fact that you have the slanting?
I think mine's unique. I think all these pads were constructed when these homes were built, and some came with carports, and some, and basically they just went, I mean, everybody in the neighborhood just goes straight up from that pad. They're not making them any wider. So whatever that pre-existing pad was, I think the intent of the builders was to give some people options on that space to either put the carport as part of the original construction. I mean, we're not original owners, so I couldn't speak to what the intent of the builders were.
And you can't testify whether or not they don't have the required 8-foot setback because you didn't do any measurements, correct?
No, but I do know that the folks next door to us had permits.
Yeah, well, you'd have to have permits to do modifications.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm assuming if they got the permit, then they had to set back to their side as well. Because that's new construction. That only happened last year.
If the hardship is the issue of water, why do you need an enclosed sunroom?
The hardship is that's part of, it's not the primary reason for it. We thought once we were doing to replace that slab and replace the driveway, and we were going to do the deck, that one of our dreams was to have the sunroom and give us a little bit more space. We have a young child in the house. Those are pretty small homes. We're sort of living on top of each other, and we just wanted to spread out a little bit. And I'm retired now, and we thought we'd take this opportunity to live a little.
Okay, no other questions.
Is there a reason that the sunroom is going to the side of the house instead of the rear?
We wanted to have the deck as a space to enjoy the outdoors and to put and enjoy that area. And then the deck, the addition on the side would enable us to still enjoy our backyard without taking 2/3 of it up with the addition. We also have a really big hill in that backyard. It slants down and to the left. The addition, I just, aesthetically, we didn't want that. I mean, it's as simple as that. We prefer it. It seems like most of the additions in the neighborhood, or I shouldn't generalize that way, but they're either on the side or on the back. The sunrooms seem to be more on the side of the homes and are significantly less expensive than an addition on the back of the home. This is simply a sunroom. It's walls with a roof, and it's basically windows. No plumbing. The heat will be a unit inside of it that's separate from the rest of the house. That's the honest answer. We prefer it like that. You get the use of the side of the property and the backyard as well. It seems to fit in with the rest of the neighborhood as well.
No further questions.
Mr. Drucker, just as we try to think, what would we approve if we were to approve this? On the back deck on exhibit A2, appears to be a hot tub. Is that going to require plumbing that goes out to the deck?
No, just electric.
Just electric?
Just
no
electric.
Water line?
No.
Okay. Are there any other utilities that you would think you're looking for as part of this?
No.
It looks like that in the picture of your home on A4, that your neighbor at 507 is slightly uphill from you, and that you're going to, this project includes this retaining wall depicted in A2. Do you realize that we probably, if we were to approve this, you'd be responsible for controlling water runoff to make sure, presumably on the other side of your house, that this project, if it exacerbates water runoff, you'll be responsible for controlling it and preventing it from adversely impacting your neighbors?
Sure, of course.
The current driveway that goes up, does it go up to and adjacent to your house, or does it stop in front of your house? It looks, I can't tell.
You
if
could
there's a little
actually drive
fence.
onto that. I mean, because a lot of people have carports there, you could conceivably keep driving right back to the side door of the home.
Okay, and so, do you know, I wasn't sure if Ed, your question listed, how deep is the driveway or to the proposed front edge of the?
We measured that, and I'm pretty sure, because that was what Kelly had asked me about, pretty sure we had,
Kelly, is that the 61?
yeah, that's the 61, to the center of Fairmont Road, to the front
Oh,
of the
that's the
addition.
center of the road, okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, but that was that 61, I'm looking for the illustration.
okay. So on the other side of your house, from the front of the property line, looks that it's roughly 35 feet, so it's approximately the same.
Yes.
I don't think I have any other questions. So I would have to ask formally whether there's anyone here who would like to speak who received certified mail, anyone here who would like to speak who received regular mail, or anyone here who would like to speak for any reason on this application. There being no one in the audience but the applicant and his family. At this point, unless anyone has any last questions, we'll close the case.
Thank you.
You want all of your exhibits to be entered formally?
Please.
Right? And we will attempt to render a decision at our next meeting on February 6th, which is scheduled to start at 7:30. And as you heard me say before, we will handle decisions at the beginning of that meeting.
Thank you very much. Thank you for hearing us.
Thank you for sticking around as late as you had to.
Thank you.